Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Newsroom. I'm your host, KHALID. But today is the 4th of April and this second of Ramzan. These are the stories that we'll be discussing during the course of the show. We'll begin, ladies and gentlemen, with the latest situation that emanates from Sri Lanka, where the cabinet has resigned and also Sri Lankan President Gotabaya Rajapaksa has declared a state of emergency. This all happened after a spate of steps that were taken that resulted in an economic crisis in the country, not only an economic crisis but also 13-hour-long load sheddings, and that prompted all the people to come out on the streets. There have been huge demonstrations across the country. The situation in Sri Lanka as we speak is very unstable, and this is what we're going to talk about in our first segment. Our second story, ladies and gentlemen, concerns the rising Islamophobia as far as India is concerned, and of course the plight of minorities, especially Muslims, whether it be in illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir or whether it be across India. We will talk with respect to the hijab ban that was imposed in Karnataka and then in other places as well. What this has resulted in is that this has created a kind of a dichotomy, not only a dichotomy but also an aggression between those sentiments of Muslims that have been following their traditions since generations and those who do not want to let them do those anymore. This change has also prompted a lot of girls that wear hijab not to attend school and not to give their exams, and this creates a huge issue as far as not only the education system in places such as Karnataka is concerned, but also the pluralism of our not so friendly neighbor that it has been pom-pomming over the last few decades. This is going to be our second story. Then we'll be talking about, ladies and gentlemen, 6 people killed and 10 injured in a mass shooting early on Sunday, and this happened in California state capital. Of course, bars and clubs were quite open at this time. Nobody knows what was the reason behind it. The perpetrators have also not yet been arrested, but of course investigations are underway. Then, ladies and gentlemen, we'll be talking about a Brooklyn-based Pakistani vocalist, Arooj Aftab. She has been creating waves in the West, but now her song Mohabbat has gained also the peculiarity of having the award for the Grammy Award, in fact, for the Best Global Performance category. This makes her, ladies and gentlemen, the first Pakistani artist to have had a prize or to have had this Grammy Award for her song Mohabbat. And of course, huge congratulations go on to Arooj Aftab for this accolade that she has received. And of course, she credited this win to a lot of people. Nevertheless, a huge congratulations to Arooj Aftab. This is going to be our last story. Let's begin with our first segment, and that concerns the situation in Sri Lanka, where the cabinet has resigned, where a state of emergency has been declared by the president, and where demonstrations are going on. More in the following report.
Sri Lanka is embroiled in worst economic crisis since decades as the pandemic dealt a heavy blow to the country's economy that depends heavily on tourism and trade. The cash-strapped Indian Ocean nation of 22 million is battling a foreign exchange crisis that prompted currency devaluation and hit payments for essential imports. The unprecedented economic crisis triggered mass anti-government protests against worsening shortages of food, fuel, power cuts, and medicine. Sri Lanka's President Gotabaya Rajapaksa has declared a state of emergency and announced a curfew in the country, branding several protesters organized extremists trying to create anarchy in the country. At least 53 people were arrested in capital Colombo after hundreds of protesters had attempted to storm Mr. Rajapaksa's private residence. Sri Lanka's President Rajapaksa has called for a unity government to deal with the country's economic crisis as cabinet ministers and the central bank governor offered to resign. The Colombo Stock Exchange suspended trade twice due to a sharp fall in the benchmark share price index. In recent months, food prices have skyrocketed. There has been a continued dearth of essential goods, fruit and vegetables, and long queues have formed outside petrol stations due to a shortage of fuel. Political parties and civil society groups have launched protests around the country, accusing the government of being responsible for the economic crunch.
To discuss the issue in Sri Lanka, we've been joined by Dr. W.A. Wijewardena, who is the former Deputy Governor of the Central Bank and columnist at the Daily FT. Thank you very much, Dr. Saab, to have joined us. Why is Sri Lanka embroiled in such an economic crisis and in such a situation where demonstrations are going on, where the cabinet has resigned, where there is a lot of economic turmoil? Is it just because of the pandemic?
No, actually, it is not because of the pandemic, because pandemic had actually exacerbated the current economic crisis in Sri Lanka. But if we take the crisis, the root of the crisis had been there for at least 10 years now. And gradually, it had become worse and worse. And due to the mismanagement of the present Gotabaya Rajapaksa administration, it has become acute now. As your reporter has very correctly reported now, the gravity of the problem is so high, people have spontaneously come to the streets and they are protesting against the government. But what I would like to say is that the crisis has hit both the purse of the people and the stomach of the people, because all of these people had lost their income sources as a result of the shortage of essential inputs like fuel, cement, steel, and medicines and so forth. At the same time, food prices have skyrocketed in Sri Lanka, and according to the latest survey conducted by the Department of Census and Statistics, the food inflation is about 30% over the year. And as a result, it has actually hit the stomach of the people also. Because of these two reasons, now the economic crisis had led to a political crisis as well. The cabinet, except the prime minister, has resigned. The prime minister is still there. But the agitators and the protesters are demanding that the Gotabaya Rajapaksa should step down as the president and the Mahinda Rajapaksa as the prime minister, and the entire government should go so that the people of the country would be able to elect a new government which can take them out of the present economic crisis.
All right, Dr. Wijewardena, you were talking of Mr. Rajapaksa. He also says that the curfew has been imposed in the country because of these protests, which is the work of, I quote unquote, organized extremists trying to create an Arab Spring. I'd like your quote on that.
Well, of course, that has been the explanation given by the government to justify the imposition of curfew from Saturday till Monday morning. But there is no any evidence that this has been led by any extremist elements outside Sri Lanka, specifically the Islamic groups in the Middle East. This had been spontaneous, and the people had come out and they wanted to protest against the president in front of his private residence. And it had been very peaceful till about 10 o'clock. But then some persons not known to the protesters had entered the scene and they had started the violence. But the blame against the Islamic elements outside Sri Lanka has no any foundation so far.
Then why brand people extremists and terrorists?
Well, there is no any case here, because as your reporter had very correctly mentioned here, people throughout the country, irrespective of their income level, social status, religion, or ethnicity, they have come out on the road and they are protesting. That is because the particular problem, economic crisis, their purse has been hit and their stomach has been hit. So as a result, there is a genuine agitation by the people of Sri Lanka. So I don't think there is any element of terrorism or any element of extremism present here, even though the government thinks that there is there. It is actually a truth which the government is using to justify the imposition of the curfew.
All right, Dr. Wijewardena, also, what do you foresee as far as Sri Lanka is concerned now that the cabinet has resigned, and also the situation persists as far as the economic turmoil in the country is concerned? What kind of measures do you feel will be taken or should be taken by the Sri Lankan government now in order to put the country out of this current state of crisis?
Well, of course, the political crisis has now actually exploded from within the government. Today, 50 government MPs, members of parliament, had decided to cross over to the opposition, which means that the government will lose its majority. And when the parliament meets next time, possibly the emergency laws which Gotabaya Rajapaksa has imposed will not be approved by parliament. And at the same time, there will be an no confidence motion against the government, and as a result, government will fall. So we don't have a government right now with the majority power in parliament. It's a minority power government. And what it should do is it has to listen to the people, and it has to form a caretaker government which will provide relief to the people immediately, and also get support from international institutions like the International Monetary Fund to bail out Sri Lanka. And after that, once the situation settles, they can go for a general election and allow the people to elect a government of their own. So right now, there is massive political instability, massive economic stability. So both are actually hitting together simultaneously on Sri Lankans today.
Dr. Wijewardena, what do you feel needs to be done first? Should the current government or whatever remains of it tackle the economic crisis, or should the political crisis be handled with, first of all, with the government being put into place through elections?
Well, it has to be done simultaneously. Of course, the government, since it has lost the majority power in parliament, it is necessary that it has to speak to the opposition parties and form a caretaker government, which will be supported by all the MPs. And then the new government will have to put in place the economic measures, which includes immediate negotiations with the International Monetary Fund for a loan facility. Until such time, there must be some bridging financing facility from some countries, friendly countries like India or China. And after that, they have to provide all types of relief to the people today, because we are short of medicine, short of cement, short of all the necessary inputs for
You are also
people
short
to.
of printing paper, Dr. Wijewardena, a reason for which a lot of
Exactly,
schools have been
printing
closed
paper.
down.
Yeah, actually, printing paper has been, in short supply, and also the prices have skyrocketed. And as a result, one of the leading newspapers had decided to not to go ahead with the print edition in their newspaper. You are correct.
Dr. Wijewardena, let's talk about the Black Flag campaign. A lot of important personalities are now joining it, whether it be the Sri Lanka national cricket captain Dinut Karunaratne or others. Do you feel movements such these can have a positive impact as far as stabilizing the current political situation of Sri Lanka is concerned?
Well, joining of by these personalities in Sri Lanka in the protest campaign would definitely put stronger pressure on President Rajapaksa to step down, because those people whom you mentioned are actually people who are being loved by all Sri Lankans. So their participation is definitely a very it's a very strong impact on President Gotabaya Rajapaksa. If he tries to remain in power, by using certain measures, he might have to think twice now, because the people like all these people who had actually played cricket previously, and the lawyers and the doctors and the university professors and peoples of all walks of life have now come to street to protest against the government. So this is a very serious situation, and the writing on the wall is very clear. And I believe that the present government will have to read it correctly and act correctly. Otherwise, it might lead to a bloodbath in Sri Lanka.
Now, Dr. Wijewardena, we have read what the US envoy to Sri Lanka, Julie Chong, had to say, that the Sri Lankans have a right to protest peacefully, and it is also essential for democratic expression. Of course, this is also the right of the people of Sri Lanka. On the other hand, we also see countries such as India trying to send cooking gas to Sri Lanka. There are thousands of tons of gas that is about to reach Sri Lanka, as reported by the NDTV. My first part of the question is, how important is protesting for the Sri Lankan people as their democratic right, and do you feel that this is something that they should continue, and if so, should they do it within certain parameters so that there is not an excessive violence that escalates as a result of that? The second part of my question is, how important will the aid that will be coming through India or through China be for stabilizing Sri Lankan's economy?
Well, of course, Sri Lanka had been a democratic country ever since it got independence in 1948. There had not been any attempt at subverting the democracy in Sri Lanka, and people had been enjoying these democratic rights, and therefore whatever they should do now should do, as you have very correctly mentioned, without violence. They should be peaceful protests, and those protests are spreading like wildfire now. And once they, once they spread throughout the country, and when all the people take part, the government will have to listen to them. Number one. Number two, the answer to your second question is what India and China had so far provided to Sri Lanka is some trade credit under which Sri Lanka can import these goods from China and India, and those can take Sri Lanka through another 1 month or so, because the Indian credit line is only $1.5 billion US, and Sri Lanka's monthly import bill is about $2 billion US. So it is even less than 1 month. What China has provided is a 10 billion yuan swap facility to Central Bank of Sri Lanka. We can use it only for the purpose of importing goods from China, and there are not many goods that we can import from China at the current period. So what I mean is, both credit lines will not help Sri Lanka permanently. It will help Sri Lanka to go through the present crisis for another 1 month or so, but at the end of the period, we will be in a worse position because we will have to pay back those loans as well. So it has.
But Dr. Wijewardena, then what should Sri Lanka do in order to slowly and steadily stabilize its economy? What are the measures do you feel as an analyst should be done or should be taken up?
Yeah, immediately Sri Lanka should start negotiations with the International Monetary Fund, because when we start negotiations with the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, ADB, and the entire Western world will come to help Sri Lanka, and as a result, there's a strong support from the international community. Unlike the short-term trade credit that we get from India or China, that will be permanent and stronger one. It will also help Sri Lanka to build up confidence in the country of the people outside Sri Lanka, so that they would continue to send their money to Sri Lanka. Right now, the migrant workers who had been sending about 650 million US per month have been sending only 200 million US because of the uncertainty and the low exchange rate which had been offered to them by the banks. Now, once the confidence is built, they will restore the previous levels, and as a result, we will have a very quick inflow of funds. Third one is that the Sri Lanka government is unable to go to the international sovereign bond market because we had been downgraded by the rating agencies, and at the same time, the bonds that had been issued in the past are being traded at a deep discount. For example, the bond to mature in year 2030 is now traded in the secondary market at about $50 per $100 bond. So it's a deep discount. So once we have the confidence of the international investors in Sri Lanka, we would be able to tap that market and raise some money, which would enable us to survive until we get the financial facility from IMF. And in my view, that financial facility should be a mega facility, and it should not be less than $5 billion US.
All right, Dr. Wijewardena, do you feel that tourism can take off now that the pandemic is more or less over in a lot of countries? Do you feel that tourism can take off and can then, help your economy grow further?
Exactly. I mean, the tourism had actually picked up. We had, in the last 2 months before the current protest started, tourism had been at the rate of, say, 100,000 tourists per month, which would mean in the whole year, we would have had about, say, 1.2 million tourists, which would have brought about, say, $3 to $4 billion US to Sri Lanka. So that is a substantial sum compared to the paucity of foreign exchange in the country today. So if you get even a US dollar from even from a single party, that has a huge value in Sri Lanka in the current period.
All right, Dr. Wijewardena, you talked about stability and, of course, the right to protest, and that is, of course, the right of any democratic country, including that of Sri Lanka. In the past, Sri Lanka has battled insurgency. Do you feel that the insurgent elements, those who want to create havoc in Sri Lanka, could try to benefit from the current situation? And if that could be a remote possibility, what should be the collective responsibility of the government and of the public?
I don't think that the terrorism movement that we had for 30 years would, re-emerge, because that had been crushed now. Even the minority Tamil people will not take up arms because they have already suffered enough and they have felt it, and therefore there won't be any violence coming from their part. But what I mean is that the if the government does not handle the current situation properly, it might lead to a situation where we will not be able to do anything right now. So government will have to tackle the current protests rather than thinking of an emerging situation which might not be very palatable for the country as a whole.
All right. Finally, Dr. Wijewardena, how optimistic do you feel in the short term and in the long term? In your point of view, will Sri Lanka come back to the position that it was in the region, and its economy will restart again, and its political situation will become more stable? Do you feel this is a short-term goal, or do you feel it is a long-term goal? Do you feel this could happen quickly, or maybe it will take its time?
Well, it is actually it should be a long-term goal, because even the IMF can help us only in the short term to come out of the current foreign exchange crisis. Coming out of the foreign exchange crisis is a necessary condition, but not a sufficient condition for Sri Lanka to go for a long-term economic growth path. For that purpose, we'll have to introduce new technology. We have to integrate Sri Lanka seamlessly to the rest of the world by adopting high-tech products, because that is the art in the world trade today. And at the same time, the Sri Lanka will have to move into to have a roadmap to connect Sri Lanka to the fourth industrial revolution within the next 10-year time period, because Sri Lanka is presently in the second industrial revolution and not even the third industrial revolution. So we have to bypass the third industrial revolution and go to the fourth industrial revolution. And that should be the plan of the new government that has to be put in place in Sri Lanka.
Thank you very much, Dr. W.A. Wijewardena, former Deputy Governor of the Central Bank and columnist of the Daily FT, joining us and talking to us about the current situation that Sri Lanka is embroiled in: economic crisis, political crisis, people who are demonstrating, and also for the moment a lot of uncertainty as far as the country is concerned. But as far as Dr. Wijewardena was saying, he was saying it is a long-term goal, but it will take time, but we have to move towards the next industrial revolution. Nevertheless, a lot of issues that pertain to the country, our best wishes go to Sri Lanka so that it stabilizes itself. Next, ladies and gentlemen, concerns rising Islamophobia as far as India is concerned. We've talked about it many a times, but now if you remember well, we've talked about the hijab ban in Karnataka and other places. A lot of girl students are now refusing to go and attend their classes or even their examinations as a result of that. What kind of crisis are we looking forward as far as this hijab ban, its repercussions are concerned? More in the following report.
The marginalization of minorities in India continues unabated as Hindu nationalist BJP government is relentlessly promoting its majoritarian agenda. India's hijab law vividly depicts sorry state of Indian secular credentials, indicating an attempt to quash religious pluralism in the Hindu majority country. Hindu supremacists are seeking a wider ban on Muslim girls wearing hijab in classrooms after Karnataka's court's controversial verdict. The move is not only seriously hampering education of Muslim girls, but also setting a dangerous precedent in the country. Leaders of the Vishwa Hindu Parishad, an affiliate of BJP parent organization RSS, said they have asked for a hijab ban in Modi's home state of Gujarat and would soon write to the country's most populous state, Uttar Pradesh. Sikhs are also facing harassment in India, and recently Hindutva mobs stopped 2 Sikh students from entering places of education while wearing the Sikh turban. Gregory Stanton, the founder and director of Genocide Watch, earlier warned that there are early signs of genocide in India. Stanton explained that genocide is a process and drew parallels between the policies pursued by Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the discriminatory policies of Myanmar's government against Rohingya Muslims in 2017. Banning religious symbols of minorities illustrates everyday humiliation and oppression by extremist right-wing groups, tarnishing secular edifice of country.
Now, this hijab ban that was enforced since the 15th of March through a court order has had repercussions on the Muslim community. The Muslims across India, notwithstanding Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, have been living more or less a peaceful life and following their local traditions. That includes wearing the hijab for the young girls and the women in certain sects of the Indian population. This ruling by the Indian court has caused a ripple as far as the social dynamic of Karnataka and other regions are concerned, and now that also other regions such as Gujarat are trying to enforce the same law, this is going to create a further division within the religious sections of India, a country that calls itself the largest democracy, a country that calls itself a pluralistic country. It is definitely going towards not only a death of pluralism but also a death of communalism, and the way the normal people used to live amongst different sects, among different religions in the past, all that image is being destroyed since the last couple of years, since Narendra Modi took power, and his saffronism has created demarcations and clear boundaries between the different religions, especially between Hinduism, the Hindus, and the other religions. What they are trying to portray India is now is a Hindu state, which was not the case. Hindus have nevertheless been a majority in India, but there have been many other religions and many other sects that have formed part of the Indian society, and now what they are trying to do is further demarcate this societal values that India was so proud of in the last few decades, and what remains is only certain scatters of what Indian society used to stand for, that is pluralism. Hamid Khan Al-Mushtaki joins us online. Hamid, thank you very much to have joined us. Hamid, now that the ban is continuing, a lot of girls are not going to school, they are not attending their exams. Gujarat is also wanting to enforce the same law. What do you foresee as far as the Muslim community and their values and their traditions are concerned in India, something that they had been following in the last decades without an issue whatsoever? All right, till Hamid Al-Mashriqi joins us, what you were trying to say is that clear rifts have emerged as far as the boundaries or the different religions in India are concerned, and those rifts are creating issues within the society in India. What a lot of experts have been saying since the last few months is that there is a slow and steady implosion within the Indian society, within the Indian values, and within the Indian religious pluralism that has been tom-tommed by Indian government since the last few decades. The way that the Narendra Modi government has been leading the people, the societies, the different religions, whether it be in Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, where the barbarities have taken a new level of escalation, whether it be other parts of India, this is something that was unprecedented. And the way the different religions, especially the Muslim religion, is being targeted is something that the world is seeing yet not reacting. There have been a lot of media reports that have come in all the big publications, whether it be the Washington Post or the New York Times, all the other publications across the world. There has been no tangible action taken as a result or as a consequence of what India is doing to its minorities. Hamid Khan Al-Mashriqi, thank you very much to have joined us. I'm glad that you are happy and safe wherever you are now. Hamid, when you see the result of the enforcement of the hijab ban in India, with girls not attending school, not attending their exams, and then other areas such as Gujarat trying to impose the same kind of ban on the Muslim society, something that was always there in India, pre-partition, post-partition, since till the last couple of years. Where do you see the Indian society, the Indian government, the Indian pluralism going?
Thank you very much, Umar. I mean, I would say that every passing day under this Modi government is proving that the Quaid-e-Azam's two-nation theory was absolutely right, and it has been proven on every occasion when they take this kind of fascist action against Muslims, particularly. I mean, they are doing it against all the minorities, but Muslims are particularly their target. Whether it was hijab issue, whether it was divorce issue, whether it was the issue of for marriages or other issues. But the thing is that I am always emphasizing that why the world is not taking the action, Why? I mean, if this report, New York Times or other newspapers or other organizations, Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, they all have given
Genocide
a
Watch.
conclusive reports. They all have given a conclusive reports, but there is no action. There is, I mean, apart from a formal condemnation, there is nothing much has been done from the United Nations or United States or European Union. That is what I am enforcing, that this is the time when there should be some kinds of sanctions needs to be imposed on India for doing their atrocities against the minorities.
Now, Hamid, when you look at the current situation, when you yourself say that the West is not responding as it should, despite the proofs, the multiple proofs that are available with them as to the way the Indians are moving forward as far as their other minorities are concerned, especially the Muslims, when they have stood for the Rohingyas very recently and called what happened with the Rohingya Muslims a genocide, why can't they call what is happening with the Muslims, whether it be in Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir or elsewhere in India, genocide as well?
Exactly. I mean, if you talk about the Rohingyas, then why don't they talk about it? Where a UK British law firm have given more than 2,000 pieces of evidence to the Metropolitan London Police. There are many evidences and dossiers given by the Pakistan to United States. I mean, what else the proof world needs to be able to take action against Indian government, because this is when a crime is done and supported by the state. This is the worst form of a crime. It is not only genocide, it is a war crime as well when the state is supporting the crime against a particular minority. And in our case, it's the Muslims who have been targeted, whether this hijab ban. I mean, I'll tell you two things, that last night there was a kind of suspicious attack on one of the mandirs, and they straight away named a Muslim guy, Mustafa, in it, and he had a knife and all that. Within I would say within 30 minutes, they named the person as a Muslim, and they changed the whole narrative, and now they are trying to find, was it ISI involved in it or no? So this is what they do.
All right. Now,
This
Hamid,
is
in all
what
of
they
this
are.
scenario, Hamid, when you look at this scenario and non-reaction from the West as well, despite the proofs, whose responsibility do you feel it is now? Is it the people who should now stand up against the barbarities that are being confronted with? What else should be done? Because, other friendly countries such as Pakistan, we have been highlighting it on different fora, but there is a limit to what Pakistan can do. Pakistan can help the people morally, diplomatically, politically, but that's where the boundary stops. What should happen as far as the people who are confronted with these brutalities, whether it be through the hijab ban or the other bans, or all that is part of what our Prime Minister has been calling Islamophobia? What needs to be done, and who should now take up action against such elements who are trying to create havoc in their society?
Umar, I am keep warning. I am keep warning the world that if the world will not take the action, then there will be violence inside. There is no other way but to have a resistance inside from India, and it is a time now. Some of the Indian leaders have already said that we need leaders like Allama Mashriqi, we need leaders like Qaid Muhammad Ali Jinnah, we need leaders like Liaquat Ali Khan. Why they are saying that? Because they have understood that there is a time and there is a need of the leadership of within Muslims, from Indian Muslims, to be able to fight for their rights. And let me tell you, it is not a minor minority. World needs to understand it is. They do call a Muslim minority, but it is over 20% of the population, which means every fifth person is a Muslim. Every fifth person is a Muslim and minority. And calling themselves minority is not fair with them, because if they will start kind of a resistance and violence. India's future will be very very terrible, which I can see now. And that's why I keep saying that if we look into the states and the movements of separation in India, Modi will be remembered as the Gorbachev of India, because this is the fate of India, to be divided into many countries, and this is the only solution which is going to be if there is no other solutions come forward.
Hamid, is the judiciary in India with the Narendra Modi government and with the BJP as far as taking important decisions concerning the Muslim population in India is concerned?
It is the worst, it's the most biased judiciary which I have seen in recent times. Whether it was the decision of Babri Mosque, whether it was the decision of Article 370 and 35A, whether it was the Karnataka High Court decision against the hijab ban, or everywhere, the Supreme Courts and the High Courts of India have become puppets of the Modi government. We have seen that. I mean, how can it's so easy thing to understand. How can a Hindu judge give his verdict on the Islamic tradition and the research? And he mentioned it that I have reached on the conclusion that Islam does not force women for hijab and Islam. But how can you say that? You are not even a
Hmm.
Muslim. You are not even a Islamic scholar. I
Hmm.
mean, they could not even appoint a Muslim judge for the hearing of hijab case. Such a big discrimination, which has never been exemplified anywhere in the world. It is a typical religious matter which should have been consulted by a religious commission before reaching to any decision by the Karnataka High Court. But they did not consider anything, and that was a straightforward decision from him, which has been condemned from many organizations. That how a non-Muslim judge can give his complete verdict based on a religious beliefs.
Hamid, should educational institutions revamp themselves as far as India is concerned in order to accumulate the Muslim values as well? Or do you feel in the long run there are going to be separate schools for the Muslims in India? What do you foresee?
Exactly. Eventually, there are two possibilities. One, that Muslim women will deprive the right of education, which they are already. And second, Muslims would have no choice but to have their own separate Muslim institutions. And I mean, who to blame? I mean, it's not a minor number of Muslim girls who are there. There are in over, in millions of Muslim girls who need education, and they would have no other way or no other choice but to have their own school. And I'll tell you, Modi government is not going to allow that even easily. This is so-called secular country has become a Hindu fascist country who is not giving any room or any relaxation to any religion, Umar.
To which extent will this marginalization continue?
How this there is, unless there is international community stops him, this marginalization is carried on, and this is putting them to the wall, to the Muslims. And I'll tell you, there I always say there is a limit of atrocities, there is limit of wrongdoing, there is limit what they are doing to the Muslims. And it is like it will be a volcano, it will be erupt any day now. It will take not only this fascist government, it will have so much collateral damage in India. This is what India needs to understand, that when there will be resistance, then there will be so much collateral damage within India. And this is what Indian intellectuals needs to understand. I believe that there is a still class of Hindu intellectuals and politicians where they do understand that what Modi is doing is damaging the secular India, is damaging the entire Indian fabric. And if Indian ideology of Modi is going to be continued, it is going to be very dangerous future of India.
Hamid, when we talk of illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, the Indian government says it's an internal matter. When we talk about such issues that pertain to the Muslim community in India, India says it's an internal matter. Do you feel the OIC or other Islamic countries, Pakistan has been really very aggressive in its approach as far as highlighting such issues across the world is concerned, but isn't it also the responsibility of other Muslim countries?
Of course, Umar, you must remember that I have been saying it for many in many different forums, that this is not only Pakistan's responsibility; it is the responsibility of all 52 Muslim countries, especially the powerful Muslim countries, especially the Gulf countries who have business ties with India, who have economical interests with India, and India have economical interests with those countries. If these countries can take a stand for the Muslims, I'm sure it will have a great impact on Indian policies. Unfortunately, it has not been happened, whether it was UAE, Saudi Arabia, and other Muslim countries, or I mean, Turkey did take some stand, or Malaysia did take some stand, and there was a lot of reaction from India as well for that. And people were saying that it will give a big jolt to the Indian economy if Gulf countries will take some action against India. And it's not only Pakistan. Pakistan is doing it, being a Muslim country, being a country who has been in the war with India for like 74 years now. because one way or the other, India has not accepted the existence of our country, and we have to fight for it. We have to be ready for any kind of aggression
But Hamid,
from India.
seeing the current situation, it also seems that if India is no longer accepting the fact that there are other minorities present inside of India that have been living there since its independence, and slowly and steadily we see the demarcation, the lines that are being drawn between the Hindus and the Muslims, or the Sikhs, or the Christians, or the Dalits, or the other religions and sects. And this is going to create an implosion within the country, whether it be a societal implosion, whether it be a political implosion. It's going to create havoc within the country, and it is high time, Hamid, finally, that the country realizes where it is going, and the measures that it is taking, what kind of implications it's going to have in the long run. Thank you very much, Hamid, to have joined us and to have come online to discuss this very important issue, that is, of course, the hijab ban, the repercussions of it, and of course this coupled with the other issues that are plaguing the Muslim community inside of India or in Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, that are creating a crisis-like situation in India. Let's come to our last two stories very quickly. The first concerns Colorado and a shooting in which 6 people were killed while 10 others were injured. This happened in the California state capital in Sacramento. This was a mass shooting that happened early on Sunday when the bars at the different clubs are open and people, of course, partying. It was the weekend. A lot of people, of course, were affected due to it, but we do not yet know what the reason behind this shooting was, or who was the perpetrator behind this. A lot of first-hand events have happened. A lot of first-hand reports have come from the people who were there at the site, and they themselves did not know what was happening. There was a lot of mayhem as far as the people post the shooting is concerned. This shooting occurred 2 blocks from the state capital and was decried by the top political officials as well, whether it be the governor, NEWSROOM, or whether it be other personalities. Now, rising gun violence is also something that a lot of communities in the United States of America have also been complaining about. There are a lot of states that allow people to carry guns and get license for it, but a lot of repercussions have been seen in the last few years with so many shootings, whether it be in educational institutions or whether it be at a place like this where the nightlife is quite active. Let's see if the US government takes some kind of concrete measures to, if not curtail gun violence, to take other measures so that such incidents do not happen in the future. Only time will tell. And the last story, ladies and gentlemen, concerns Pakistan and, of course, an American of Pakistani descent, Arooj Aftab, who has now become the first Pakistani to win a Grammy Award. The Grammys are like the Oscars as far as music industry are concerned, and Arooj Aftab has now become the first Pakistani to have gotten this for her song Mohabbat. She has not contended for a very Western theme, but her song Mohabbat is, of course, enshrined in the culture and traditions of the subcontinent. She was born to Pakistani parents in Saudi Arabia. She spent her teenage years in Lahore, and then she went to Boston's Berklee School of Music to study musical production and engineering. She has performed at a number of New York events. She has taken out a number of albums, and her Grammy Award only further solidifies her presence as a major Asian artist and a major Pakistani artist within the West and, of course, in the United States of America. So congratulations to Arooj Aftab, and I'm sure there are many more awards in the offing as time will pass. This ends our newsroom for today. We'll be back, inshallah, tomorrow with new stories, segments that pertain to you, us, Pakistan, and our society. Till then, have a blessed Ramadan, have a blessed Roza, and, of course, stay safe with the current protocols of the pandemic so that this pandemic does not escalate further. We are at a very low rate. Let's keep it that low. Allah Hafiz.